because that's how we know we've started.
Excellent.
Welcome to the Business Mastery Podcast. Today we are joined by Dr. Greg. Welcome, Dr. Greg.
Thank
from
you.
Instream Consulting.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Marcus.
Why don't you start us off by telling us what your business is, what you do, who you help?
Gosh, I always roll my eyes and look up when somebody asks me that because it's always just a bit complicated. But yeah, I'm an ecologist, a freshwater ecologist, and so broadly speaking, we're an environmental consultancy. We provide advice to people who need to know about waterways, be they developers or people from environmental backgrounds, so councils or the government. And we currently have, there's 5 of us. We're recruiting for another person by the end of the year, and been in business for 10 years.
10 years.
This year.
Yeah. And so, for the lay people that don't understand big words like ecology,
Shane.
Yeah. What is the day in the life of an ecologist look like? A freshwater ecologist.
Yeah, I'll answer that a science way by saying it depends.
Yeah.
That's a proper science way. And it really does depend. As a consultant, it's really can be quite varied, and certainly our job is really varied. We have a real mix of clientele, and we also have a mix of the types of work we do. So we do a mix of field work where we go out and we sample things like fish and water quality. And then we'll also have office work where we might be interpreting those results for our clients to say, oh, you want to do this in this piece of land, you've got this living in the water, therefore you need to be doing these sorts of things to protect them. Or alternatively, if we're giving advice to central or local government, we might be saying, here's the sorts of things that you might need to do from a policy direction to protect those things in the waterways. But that's quite a course level. Really, day to day, for someone like me, who's the old fart in the office, I'm sort of doing a mixture of that technical work, but also the business as well. So I do both. Yeah.
And in terms of the industry as a whole, why is that function so important?
The sort of ecology and environmental consulting. Yeah, obviously I'm biased, so
Sure.
It's obviously important, but I guess there's a couple of reasons. One is that, if you read the newspaper at all and you see the news, you would see issues about water quality and the state of the environment. So people care about it. And so there's a lot of pressures on the environment, and there's legislation that says we shall protect and restore the quality of our natural ecosystems. So there's a legal imperative, but there's also a social license there as well. And so the people who employ us need to either navigate those sort of legal requirements. So we're saying, oh, here's what's here, here's what you do to manage and minimise effects and also to end up with positive outcomes. And for the people who are the policy makers, we're helping guide that policy.
Yeah. So you're helping people both navigate the policy and the government agencies setting the policy. That's
right. And I really enjoy doing both. I think there's a real legitimacy to, I guess, claiming to be an independent ecologist or scientist or advisor. It's a greater legitimacy if you're operating on both sides, I guess. Because there will come times when you'll be challenged, and it really makes you think, okay, well, what really is the best outcome here? How do we do best for the environment while also advising these people?
And so I imagine that for you guys, there's on the one hand there's a passion for the craft, and then on the other hand, and the environment on the other hand, there's actually we've got to do some business here and grow that. How do you blend those two worlds?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's what I've always found interesting is the practical aspect of science. So I guess, I come from a background, my dad was a tradesman, and I, in my summers, used to work alongside him, and I've always enjoyed the practicality of making and fixing things. And I was lucky and I was fortunate enough that our parents, even though they didn't have the opportunity for tertiary education, they saw the value in it. And so I guess I've got that same ethos when it comes to environmental or professional services. So for me, I guess we look at things slightly different from a straight academic lens. I guess every job I approach, I think, well, how can I actually make a difference here? Because if I'm just going out there and turning the handle and saying, oh, here's exactly what you wanted and exactly what you needed, I don't think I'm really helping anybody that much. I really want to feel like we're making a difference, and it's not about pushing people in awkward directions necessarily, but really making positive change and seeing the value of positive environmental change.
And I imagine that's rewarding in a lot of ways, being able to actually give advice. Hopefully it's followed. But in terms of, like, you are the middleman, if you will, brokering between those two parties and trying to get all the stakeholders, in classic consultant language,
Yes.
To actually get an outcome that's good for everyone. So to go back a step, how did you end up studying what you did, and then what made you jump into starting a business?
Yeah, well, that's two quite big questions.
Quite two different questions. Yeah.
Well, I guess the first one in some ways is a bit easier because there's a degree of randomness to everyone's career path, and certainly the further along the career path you are, you sort of realise just how much you've veered from when you started. But when I was at school, I had a few teachers who were quite passionate about science, but also a bit different and really positive and engaged, and that hooked me on biology quite early. And the same held at university. So it was something that I was good at and I was interested in. And I think I apply that sort of now, that piece of, I guess, experience to younger people who say, career options and stuff. And it's like, you don't have to get too hung up about the end point. It's about something that you're interested in and something that you're good at. At least you can work on it and be good at. The second aspect about business, look, I didn't even think I was going to be a consultant, let alone have my own business. So I went through and did a PhD because I was quite passionate about doing more researchy or more in-depth science. Earlier on in my career, it was apparent that if I wanted to go a bit further, I had to do a bit more than what I had, which was like a postgrad diploma.
What was the topic of your thesis?
It's pretty obscure.
They usually are, aren't they?
Well, actually,
if you're trying to contribute to the knowledge base.
Yeah. It was the hyporeic zones in Canterbury alluvial rivers. So it's where rivers and groundwater interact. So
thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of sums up where I find things interesting, is where you get these transition zones, these overlaps between ecosystems. And that's what I got fired up about at the time. But the transition to business, it was, I guess, having my own business. It was serendipity that got me into consulting, as I indicated. So it came out of a PhD, and we had a young family. And the next thing you do when you come out with a PhD, if you take the academic track, you do a postdoctoral fellowship for a couple of 3 years. And the pay is usually pretty poor. You come out and you're still the boy, still the kid, and then you start your career at 30 or something, And with a young family, and we were looking at options overseas, it was sort of financial suicide. It just didn't make sense. I mean, you could do it, but it would have been really
tough.
And so it was just a sliding door, got into consulting, and then, I was really fortunate to work for a New Zealand owned consultancy called King & Mitchell, which then subsequently got bought out by a bigger company called Golder, which after I left got bought out by another bigger company. And was with them for 8 years, and then went again took an opportunity to go to Canada with them for 2 years, came back to New Zealand ostensibly so that we could be with family and have our kids go to do exams at New Zealand high schools. And coming back, it was just that sort of reflection. What do you do next? And I had often wondered about the going out consulting and sort of working for yourself, having your own business. And it was really not much more than that. And I guess I hadn't really thought about it too much, other than, let's give it a go.
Yeah.
And it's really only been over the course of time that I've sort of really thought about it more, about what the motivations were. And I guess that's something that when we started having conversations, made me think about it a bit more. It took a while to unpeel that, because we make decisions that we don't necessarily analyse. That's what we do. I want to do that. When I started to think about it a bit more, I guess it made a bit more sense.
Yeah. And how has jumping forward now from starting out and kind of just giving it a crack, jumping forward now, how do you think about business now compared to how you thought about business back then?
The reality is I didn't think about business back then, and I think, having now read some useful bits of literature on business and listening to podcasts and all that kind of stuff, all within about the last 12 months since we started working together, I've realised that it's really common for people to go out, especially in a professional services background. They'll go, oh, look, makes sense, I'll just get paid. Why does the boss clip the ticket? Why don't I just go and do it? But then, you fall into that, I'm getting busy, this is great, but now I need to take on somebody. Oh, that's fine, I've taken on somebody, that'll alleviate the pressure. And then, I'm getting busy, I've taken... There's no real form to it. You just think, if I just keep employing people, I'm gonna reach this nirvana-like state. And then, it wasn't reaching a nirvana-like state. It was, you go from worrying about being busy enough to being flat out busy and just spinning wheels. And so then there was that turning point, I don't know, a couple of years ago, year and a half ago, where I had to make a call about what do I do, because having more is certainly not better. More of the same is not better. And so then I thought, well, geez, am I better off, just being me again on my own? And I didn't really entertain that, but that was sort of like a false dichotomy. It's like, well, what do? I just keep going like this. And the answer was no. I needed to change. I needed help. And then, we realised that, I guess we had the opportunity through talking with some friends to get some business mentoring, and that combination of that mindset, knowing the direction of travel, and then having the tools to be able to know how to do business, that's just changed everything. So,
Yeah, I want to jump back to that, knowing the direction thing, because I think that's critical. I had a client up we used to work with who has this great phrase he mentioned one day to me, which was, I've got to decide if I'm going to pump this or dump this. And it's always stuck with me. I think sometimes it's helpful to think through that lens wherever we're at, and something is, it's kind of like getting a plane off the ground. It's a whole lot of work to get it off the ground, but once you're cruising at altitude, it's a whole lot easier. But the worst thing you can do is stick somewhere in between cruising at altitude and in that turbulent phase of and like you said, I think until you've really considered the options and made that commitment to what direction you're going to go in, you can get trapped in there, and life can get pretty grindy.
Yeah, and I think that's really common from talking to other people, but also reading and listening to others who are small business owners who have started out. It's hard yakka, and most of us come from a technical background, you know, whether it's as a trade or a professional service or whatever, and that's what we've known. If you're lucky, you've gone through and you've had some training on project management and all that kind of stuff. But man, that's so different from owning a business. It is so incredibly different. I thought I knew it, and I realised that was absolute garbage. You know, I realised that all these kids that were going around doing commerce degrees, you know, they were actually learning something.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, you know, that analogy about, you know, flapping around. I mean, it's like you're just flapping your wings, and you really would like to be flying, but you just don't know how. And all you're doing is expending energy and not getting off the ground. So I think, you know, if I want to take that analogy a bit further, I'm not sure if
Great biology.
I'm not sure if
analogy,
it's,
by the way.
Yeah.
The bird flapping wings.
I think it's starting to get a bit suspect, but anyway, I do think though that, you know, that mindset turning point was at least I knew where I was headed. At least I knew that I was flapping my wings, right? At least I knew the direction I wanted to be. I wanted to be up there, and I was starting to take steps in that direction, and was getting in that direction. But then I also realised that, yeah, look, I just can't do this without some help, because it's the classic. As soon as you start to know a little bit more, you know how much you don't know. And ignorance is bliss, but it can actually be quite painful. and ultimately, you know, again, using ecological examples, there's plenty of ignorant species that haven't survived. Not that there was anything wrong with them individually, but they were ignorant of the perils.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, is that it's not just mindset. There's a few things that you've touched on there, obviously the skill set as well, and then it's systems, which we'll get to in a second. But I'm curious about, just to dig into that, the mindset set first. So it sounds like one of the key mindset shifts for you recently, and we're skipping forward, we should give some context here, but sticking on the mindset thing, one of the key mindset shifts has been that moving from struggling along to and thinking about scaling back to actually scale this up and go for it. What other mindset shifts have there been for you and over this last wee period of time where the business has grown and you've gotten to altitude?
Yeah, quite a lot really. I guess. Yeah, if you take away that first big step of, okay, I'm changing the direction. So that was the first sort of general mindset. But yeah, I guess the next step was once we started having some conversations. When did we start that? Was it November last year?
Yes, before that, like August, yeah.
August, yeah, okay. And you will remind me of this, and you know, no one likes to be reminded of their failings, but I was pretty reluctant on a number of fronts to, I guess, change certain things, just because I guess it seemed a bit, I don't know. At the time,
You can be honest.
Yeah, maybe it seemed a bit businessy, a bit hard-assed, a bit this or that, and also, you know, when you've been doing something for a long time, you just, you know, you get set in your ways, and you know, being a strong-minded person, and a cynic, it comes with
your own opinions.
Yeah, with my own opinions. Sometimes it takes a lot of convincing, but those sort of changes were things around, I guess, understand. It was the habit-forming type stuff, you know. So that wasn't so much. Well, I guess it was a mindset, you know, like, yes, okay, if I'm gonna. If things need to change, okay, yes, things need to change. Oh, what things need to change? Yeah, I need to start better tracking my time. you know, because as a business owner, it's really easy just to go, my time's not important, I'll just get my time down, I'll just write down what's, you know, an invoice, whatever. But of course, years of consulting says, well, if you don't record your time well, you're always going to undersell yourself. But then also it's like, well, if I'm concerned about how much time I'm doing admin type things and I'm not measuring it, then I've got no idea of whether things are improving. So I think some of the big changes were around, I guess, measurement. So there's both the financial measurement, which we kind of already had to a certain extent, but not in a very fine-grained way. It wasn't very sophisticated. But also, I guess, productivity or personal productivity as well as staff. And then other things like management of the pipeline, if you like, what's coming up, what have we got going forward, and the processes. The other thing, the really big thing that became clear was that going from Greg and Co. to Instream as a functioning company, we really needed to get the stuff that's inside my head down on paper so that people can follow it, so that I don't go, what's going on here, you know? And that's coming back to that, I guess, the E-Myth book by
Michael Gerber.
There you go. There's some good advice in there around that.
Yeah.
Which was really helpful, I thought. And it's not something that's happening overnight. It's a process, but we are working on that, and we've got a sort of a timeline for getting the processes in place so that ultimately anybody who comes into the company goes, so what's my role? How do I fit? What do I do? It's really clear. It's basically, here's the Instream guidebook.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. Moving from, because that's how anyone that starts a business will bring some skills to the table. They will bring more drive than anyone else in the business because they're more motivated than anyone because their financial lives are directly tied to the outcomes of the business. And there's usually a high degree of passion for the craft, whatever that craft might be. But in doing so, I think we often, and we're forced in the early days because you don't have money to hire people or the right people or necessarily even put the right software or systems in. I think we're often forced into that role of being a jack of all trades. And we pick up skills, we learn to do stuff better than other people, sometimes even better than qualified people in the same role. And it is a pretty unique process, that starting a business in that regard. But I think one of the issues with that is that we do become Marcus and Co. or Greg and Co. or Steve and Co. whoever it is, and we don't actually adopt that mindset, like you said, of this has to be a company, a business that is at least progressing, moving toward being less dependent on you or me, and that's a really important shift, because I think if you don't do that, I was speaking to someone yesterday actually on the phone who is in the joinery business. They've been around for 20 years and they got about 7 years of their working life left, and they've somewhat plateaued, and the business is built around the owner. He's doing 60 to 70 hours a week. Oof. And it's like you either change the mindset and what you're doing and the skills, and get some new skills and put some systems in place to change that, or you don't. And who wants another 8 years of that?
Yeah.
Tough going.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, along with that, I guess the processes thing is this acknowledgement that, part of the growth thing that I really enjoy is I love the collegial environment. I love working with people who do the same sort of stuff. I love bouncing ideas around, and so I know I could potentially make a certain amount of money and be comfortable just doing some really quite niche stuff on my own, but it'd be bloody boring for me. I really enjoy the energy that I get from others and seeing those people grow and mentoring them, because, this stage in my career, that's what it's about. That's what I really value. So seeing some senior staff and intermediate staff come in who have got different backgrounds, but then explaining to them, I guess, the values that I've got, which are now the values of the company, and getting that on paper and saying it out loud, that's really exciting, because that's part of that. Yep, this is the value system that I have. This is the value system of Instream. This is what makes us unique. And we had a couple of value setting sessions, and I found it bloody hard. Like what are your core values? And it took quite a bit of work, but now I come back to it, and I think when we're discussing potential new work or potential new clients, those values are front and center. Are we making a difference? Is this in any way compromising our integrity, and all those sorts of things? So I think that's the other part of the processes makes it sound all really clinical and all that kind of stuff, but underlying all that are the values. And I think I feel like we're on this journey at the moment for about the next year of getting the processes to reflect the quality and the I guess the values that we have. Once we've got that in there, it's going to be so much differenter for people who are onboarding, but also I think it'll be really helpful for everybody. It's going to make it easier for people to go on holiday. Not that we don't go on holiday or anything, but it means that you're not doing 60 hours, which incidentally I don't do.
Yeah, and it's a nice segue in terms of the skills, and I think one of the skills that you have, and you've just talked about that in terms of something that you really value, is investing in your team. What do you think are some of the skills that you have just naturally that have helped you succeed in business, and then what are some of the ones that you've had to learn but have made a big difference to how the business runs?
Ooh, okay. So I think there is quite a clear distinction there. I mean, some of the you could, in inverted commas, natural skills that I guess I've come to consulting with. They're things that I learnt through school and that kind of stuff. I'm an extrovert, so I'm pretty comfortable talking to people. Mm-hmm. I think if you're an introvert, it can be a bit harder. This is coming from the perspective of an extrovert. It must be impossible, but but it's a different style. Yeah. I really enjoy, I guess, seeing people grow and develop, and I get a real kick out of. I've got an inquiring mind. So I think the sort of skills that I've brought are that the outgoing nature. I've got a sense of humour that I guess I've always felt, I quite like to disarm a situation with a bit of humour. Sometimes it's not appropriate, and I will dial it down. But I do think that we're in a business that is pretty serious, and it doesn't mean we can't, have fun, and I think that's important, because if we were just every day counting how many penguins are dying and how many species are dying and all that kind of stuff, it'd be just bloody depressing. And it's not to say that that's not important, but we have to be able to enjoy life as well and function. So I think having good humour, and then I also the analytical skills and organisational skills. It partly comes with what we do as in my discipline. So we're used to looking at numbers, really comfortable with numbers. So that's made it easier looking at financials. Mm-hmm. And also that desire, that organisational aspect. We're organising again, looking at patterns and numbers and putting things into groups. Well, that's kind of what you have to do when you're organising a business. However, that's all very well, but what I had to learn was, well, what are the numbers we should be looking at? how do we actually organise this stuff? And that was, some of the understandings of project management software. What should we be looking at when we're recruiting beyond, have they got an A in biology and did they come across well in the interview? What are my goals? Man, I didn't really have goals other than some vague idea about, sitting on a beach, typing on my computer at some stage, and I guess being surrounded with colleagues who do similar stuff and we're equally supportive. So there were all those sorts of things that I had to learn, which are just, it's like business 101, but it's a little bit more than that. I mean, there's marketing and, so I think it was helpful having the experience I did, being confident and extroverted and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that was also self-limiting because it means that I probably just pedaled on for longer than I needed to. But here we are. And I guess the last thing I'd say is that, I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm really buzzed at this change in direction, really energized, and I don't think you're ever too late. I think this person who's later in their career, it's not too late. Because, I'm probably just as busy or maybe slightly busier than I was before I, took on this different direction. But I'm way happier because there is direction and I can see, we've got goals, they're clear, there's a way to get there, and there's mini goals along the way, and we're bringing everybody along, and I can see it. I think it's quite energising for the company too. I'm getting positive feedback from my colleagues, my employees. So yeah, it's really worth it.
It is, and I think there's something to be said for just that when the leader models growth and an open mind, and the team sees you developing in your skills, like that is the ultimate mirror for them to be able to look into. If they don't see that from their leader and they see stagnation and blame and excuses and denial, it's bloody tough. It's not an enjoyable environment to be in on a daily basis. But on the flip side of that, when you're actually growing as a business and you're investing in your people and you're investing in yourself, more importantly, then it's a cool culture to be part of. So I think there was one skill you mentioned there in terms of the financial analysis and that kind of crossing over nicely from the data analysis you're doing in the craft, and then that helped you to pick up the finance side of things more easily. What's been most helpful in terms of for you, or what's the key skill that you've learned that's kind of different from that technical training as far as the finances go?
I guess, well, it's probably, I don't know. I mean, there's a few things. I mean, discipline is a general, I guess, skill or discipline. I don't know how you describe discipline. It's a skill. And I think, there's one thing to look at the finances regularly, but there's another thing to, I guess, look at them and go, oh, what's wrong with that, and know how to fix it, or know somebody who knows how to fix it, or have somebody who goes over them with you. Like, Gustav goes over the numbers with us, and it's like, oh, okay, each month he's just checking some stuff, whereas I would just be looking at that. What's the revenue? What's the profit? Blah, blah, blah. So part of it is looking at that with a much more leery eye, and then probably, no, without a doubt, the other big aspect is setting goals, setting financial goals. I hadn't done that because it was just, well, how are we doing compared to last year? Oh yeah, about the same. And it was like that for a few years. It was because there was this, well, if I grow, it's just going to get more crazy. So I was just driving with the handbrake on, right? Because growth was just, for me, was just about financial growth. That's what I thought, really. So there was driving with the handbrake on. Whereas if you're setting goals and you go, okay, well, really, rather than just breaking even, paying ourselves and all that kind of stuff, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to grow the revenue, because that means it's providing opportunities for our staff to grow, and it's providing the opportunity for us to provide new roles, and grow both physically and financially as a business, but also as individuals in terms of skill sets. And that's, I guess, I've intentionally veered back to the growth thing, because as you know, earlier on when we were meeting, growth was a bit of a dirty word, just because I guess I was doing this job because I'm really passionate about the environment, I care about it, and it's great that we get paid to do it and all that kind of stuff. And growth, I guess, there's this feeling, oh, well, is it sustainable growth? Because we look at the markets and we say, oh, geez, it's all just based on oil and gas, or we're some people are really obsessed about it, destroying the planet and all that kind of stuff. And I guess, I'm not interested in growth for growth's sake. But then I realised, with the benefit of a little bit of reading, that really growth was just as much about understanding new ideas and opening your mind to different things. So like the growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. And that understanding that was really helpful for the finances, in terms of, okay, well, if I want to get to this point in my life or this year, and I want our company and employees to be at this point next year or in the year after and the year after, okay, well, how do I get there? I've got to set goal. This is what we want from a lifestyle, work style perspective. And then, well, what does that require? Well, that requires money. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, so we set our goal there. Here's where we are. And we set benchmarks along the way. And then we have to then throw on all the other things like marketing and sales to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's so many different paths we could pick up off that, but I just wanted to dig into a bit of the drive behind the team. So it sounds like the team and their flourishing is really important to you. Why is that so for you?
I guess I just know that it can really suck sometimes, in professional services. You get really busy, and in fact, I guess, being Gen X, there was almost a heroic aspect to working late and doing extra hours and all that kind of stuff. And it really is, it's a bit of a mug's game. It's you can just get really burnt out, and there are a lot of people who have been doing what they do for even 5 years, but 10, 15 years, 20 years, and they can just feel like, well, what's the point, And so I guess, having had an epiphany, but not quite, having changed tack, realised, oh, hang on, there's ways we can change the dial, turn the dial here. What I'm really wanting to see, what's really important to me, is that I can help guide and encourage my employees to have a life where there is, meaning in work, and that it's well balanced with their life, and that we're setting goals with them so that it helps set direction, and also helps with their overall happiness, because work is a big part of our life, and people talk about work-life balance, and it's quite controversial, because the reality is that it's not as simple as that. Work is such a big part of our life. You have to make work good and enjoyable while you're there, in my opinion anyway. Some people, they're quite happy just to go there and eat their lunch, mm-hmm. and that's fine, but they're not going to be necessarily as engaged in the work they do, and they might not necessarily be as engaged with the people who work around them. So that's the motivation to me, is to see people flourish, and to me that's the without sounding too egotistical, but probably doing it anyway, I think that's the challenge. I mean, that's what I really want to see. I want to see, so somebody's like, oh man, I've got this crazy forward workload and there's stuff coming on, I'm going to have to work extra hours. It's like, okay, a little orange light goes off. We've got this new project management software that's managing the pipeline. We can see this stuff. How do we make that work? Is this a short term or is this a medium term? You know, and similarly, it's just chaos. I haven't even put things into the project management software, but okay, well, let's set ourselves some times to get that done so that we can reduce the chaos to a manageable level. There's always a degree of chaos.
And in any business, there's a degree of chaos, yeah.
Yeah.
And I so agree. I think I really love Dan Pink's model and drive of humans and how they think and in relation to work. And he says there's 3 things that every human being wants in their work. They want a sense of mastery. They want to feel like they're getting better at what it is they do. They want some autonomy. They don't want to be hovered over and told, do this, do that. They want some freedom to do it how they think it's best to be done. And they want meaning. They want purpose in the work they're doing. And I think if we can, as owners, as leaders, as employers, if we can build companies where those 3 things are valued, then it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you come back to those 3 principles, there's always something that you can do to help your team feel more meaning, more purpose in their work, more autonomy, give them more agency, and there's always something we can do in terms of helping them progress in their skills and develop in whatever it is they're doing. Doesn't matter if they're picking up bins off the side of the road. You can still get better at that. Yeah. But it's not. I think the bit that we mistake as employers often is thinking it's up to them to do that. It's for them to drive that. No, you're the leader.
Yeah,
that's
right.
You should be the catalyst for that. But yeah, I like that. That's cool. Talk to me about systems, because you have invested in a bunch of processes within your business that have made things faster and easier, more visible, more transparent. What are some of the systems that you've introduced within the business, or rhythms or processes that have really made a big difference?
Yeah, so I just caveat my answer by saying it's very much a work in progress, because it
could be personal as well. I guess the other, when I say personal, I mean like your own personal systems.
Yeah. So yes, it's a work in progress, and I am still testing and developing and trying and all that kind of stuff, different techniques and whatever.
Like a good scientist.
Well, it's just, I guess, it's about, part of it's habits, right?
Yep.
You know, and that great book, Atomic Habits, there's stuff about, you know, making a habit stick, making it easy, attaching it to other things so that it's going to happen. And so I've tried some things, and some things have worked better than others. And some of the examples of things that have worked really well for me. So, for example, accounting for my own time. You know, it's always been a bugbear. I can remember getting hassled for not getting my timesheet done on time. And then as a business owner, you're like, for God's sake, get your timesheet done. And then and then now I'm being quite, okay, I really need to better account for my time, both so that I can charge it more reasonably or precisely, but also so that I know what I'm doing and can track that over time, you know, right? So that's all very well and good, but it's like, well, okay, I need to do it. I should do it. I'm gonna do it. And then somebody, might have been you, said, well, you know, you need to do that. You need to actually start doing it. And so then, using that principle of attaching or making it simpler, this habit, I've just got it. When I turn my computer on now, the first thing that pops up is internet. You know, the Google, and then the first thing that pops up in Google is the software that does my timesheet, and the first thing that opens when that software is my timesheet. So it's there every time, and I can ignore it, and I do sometimes, but it's there, and I'm aware, and so that's really helped the time recording, and it's something that I have suggested to a colleague that might be a helpful thing for them to do. So that's an example of just a really simple switched where I've made it easier for me to form the habit.
So when your browser opens, the first thing that opens is your timesheet and your project management software.
Yep. Because it's harder to ignore than 25 tasks or reminders on your calendar or something.
Totally.
So that's been really effective.
Especially when you want to cheeky browse the internet at 8 a.m. when you get into the office.
Yeah, exactly.
Get back in line, Greg.
Yeah. And then the other thing, which is a bigger journey, was I was a bit frustrated at our lack of ability to, I guess, manage both the potential pipeline of work coming in, so I guess our what you might call leads or possibilities, and also our existing workload in terms of scheduling, because we were scheduling, we tried one piece of software, but it was kind of good, but it was completely separate from our financial software. And it was frustrating to me because I'm like, well, how hard can that be? Surely we can put in a calendar when people are going to be working and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, our new admin, Gemma, one of her great jobs, not long after she joined us, was to research some new project management software, knowing kind of what we wanted, and then deciding on one. And so we decided on one a few months ago, and it's been a hella journey getting to this point, because it's always hard bringing projects across and learning new stuff. But the long and the short of it is that we now have the software that both manages nicely the possibility, the possibles and the probables in terms of the leads and the quotes. We can schedule those, so we can put that into diaries in the future, as well as current workload. So it's all, rather than sitting in 2 different pieces or 3 different pieces of software, it's all one. And it's already bearing fruit in terms of, one of my employees, he's really good at managing his time or in bits of techie stuff. And so he's put all his project tasks and everything in this calendar, and he came around and said, I've got X months worth of work. And I went, oh, okay, well, that's great. That's really good. And then we're also able to go, how it works in consulting is that you say you're going to do all this, but then stuff comes in. So we were able to put in this is the random stuff that comes in factor. And of course it was a pain in the neck because it meant you had to redo all the scheduling, but it meant that it was more realistic as well. And that's something that we're playing with now, rather than going, this is what we're saying we're going to do, and not committing to it or not getting it done, and then people working extra hours to get it done. We have a way of managing time. And to me, that's really important. I really want to be able to smooth things out so that we don't have, it's not so much of that real super high pressure stuff, and then worrying about the quiet times. You can sort of even things out. I mean, we're still going to have high pressure situations. That's part of life, and it's part of how we get things done. There are 2 examples of where it's both a subtle shift to get a habit and behaviour change with the timesheet popping up as soon as I log in, through to the full Monty, completely changing a system.
Yep.
And in between, we are documenting, I guess, the processes that we do, for example, for reporting, again, stuff that's inside my head, but also the head of my employees, so that, again, we spend less time correcting things and more time just going over relatively small edits and things like that. And that actually brings me to another point, I guess. It was an analogy, it's sort of a handrail analogy. You're talking about guiding and autonomy. And I feel that one of the challenges with providing autonomy is that you give people so much autonomy that, they fall off the steps, and they get lost in the woods or whatever. And everybody has different understandings of the requirements. And so I think one of the challenges that I've sort of set for our company when we're documenting processes or giving guidance is making it as clear as possible for people to get things right. Because it shouldn't be, oh, you've got to learn to do this. You've got to, you must just do that better. It's like, well, no, this is really obvious. This is what you do, and it's in black and white. And a small example of that would be with report writing. We often, it's the end product of a lot of what we do in professional services is advice that's written. And it takes time to learn how to write well. And there's different writing styles, and especially for earlier career people, it's just learning by doing, right? That's the way I did it. I did a PhD, and my supervisor was a very good writer, and it was brutal initially, but I learned how to write at the end of it. But we don't all have 3 years or 4 years or whatever to sit around earning no money and learning how to write. We have to do it on the job. So what we're trying to do is provide more guidance by way of our reporting templates and having regular sort of skills training sessions. So it just makes it easier to succeed.
Yeah, nice. Cool. What's next to round us out? Because I know it's lunchtime, almost for you. To round us out, what do you see the next year looking like for your industry? Because it's been a year, 2024.
It's been a year.
It's been a year. What do you see the next year or the years ahead for environmental consultancies like yourself? And secondly, what's next for Instream?
Well, I think the years ahead for environmental and ecological consulting are probably similar to what they've been, because there is there has been an overall increase in people caring and being passionate about the environment. Now, some people will take umbrage at that because they've always cared, okay, but as a general statement, there's more people aware of climate change and caring about it, for example. There's more people aware of water quality issues and caring about it. And that means that regardless of what sort of political stripe happens to be in government, there's going to be a requirement to, I guess, protect and restore what's there. So I think, if you've got a real pro-development government, well, that's going to be good for business because there's going to be lots of things going on. Everybody is going to be busy, and we'll be busy running out there giving advice and all that kind of stuff. And if it's a pro-environmental government that comes in, well, then there's going to be more emphasis about policy around protecting the environment and all that kind of stuff. So I think 2025 and beyond is going to be good in the sector. Those who have been smarting because they did more work, say, for developers, fingers crossed for them, they'll see some change and see some, I guess, improvements. For the company, it's really exciting. We've got these plans for growing staff, but also, as I said, getting more documentation. And God, I'm excited about documentation, but getting things in place. Yeah. And for me, it's going, as I said, it's this going from Greg and Co. To Instream and having this. It being autonomous, and so there's autonomy for the staff but also for the company itself, so that individuals feel that they can step out but that they're doing stuff that's valued, so the next year we'll probably have a couple of 3 more staff in the next year or so, and I think you'll see a really solid company that continues to do really fun stuff that we find interesting, stuff that we find engaging, and of value to us. There'll be a few more peeps, but I think we'll be doing well. Yeah. Nice.
Let's close with a question it's a bit generic, but it's always a good one to reflect on. If there was one thing that you had the mic for 10 seconds or 60. And a closing shot at a business owner watching this or listening to this, what advice would you give them?
Oh, look, I think if you're in that situation where you haven't got any sort of professional training in business, then you should get it. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. It would have been helpful to have got that that earlier. And then the other thing, I guess, is just recognising mindset, because people could have suggested I got business advice, and I would have just been like, what would I do that for?
Yeah.
But I think you do, it's a bit of self-reflection. So what do I want to be doing? How am I going to get there? Have I got the tools to get there? And the answer is, probably going to be no. I think it's worth going out, seeking advice. It's usually, you get a little bit of free advice, and then seeing if it's for you. It's certainly worth the investment, is what I've found. So, yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Greg. That's a wrap.